Hello, hello. Here today in the Tier 8 tech tree carrier Lexington. You'll note I'm using a slightly different account. This is a bit of an alternate project of mine, but we'll get onto that later. We're top tier in the Lexington, so very pleased with that, obviously. The Lexington is exceptionally powerful, find the Fubuki, but I'm not angled very well to hit him at the moment on this map on Estuary. So I'm just going to dive in and hit the Pensacola as intended. As an aside, for a Tier 6, the Pensacola actually is quite an impressive AA suite, just barely worse than that of its Tier 7 counterpart in New Orleans, thanks to its numerous Bofors mounts. You can see there the combined AA of himself and his teammates do bring down 5 of my rocket planes. However, he still took 9,400 unhealable damage from the Havars of the Lexington, which are extremely potent with their 33mm of penetration. Now the Fubuki we glossed over, even though he is a single TD on the enemy team, has smoked up, so we're going to be unable to engage, but overall this is going to be an easy match. Now I am pressing this side, but I'm going to move away toward the center on Estuary. Enemy carries the Lexington. In terms of this match, the only dangerous AA ship is basically just the mains. The Nice now is mildly inconveniencing, particularly when he's beside the Hipper, which is a decent AA boat like that. But it's mostly because of the high density of flak. You'll see me clipping some here. Well, you see me clipping some here. This is actually in real time, so there's that. But it's not going to stop me from doming the Nice now for 10,000 damage, and more importantly, setting 3 flyers, which apparently he's not willing to put out, which is interesting. Now the HEDBs that you just saw have, I believe it's 9200 HE alpha per bomb, so it's about 3,000 damage per bomb to up to 18,000 damage in a strike, with 53mm of armor penetration, so they punch through Nice Now's 50mm deck like it's not there. So when you're top tier, there's basically no ship in the game that can shatter your HE bombs, which is obviously a great boon. I'm going to continue to let him burn while I look for my next target. There's that mains I mentioned. Now the mains does have fairly good AA. It's German AA, 5.2 kilometer range with the 105mm SKC mounts, but it is quite intense. But the torpedo bomber squadron, the Helldiver torpedo bomber in this case, does have very good endurance thanks to both American hit points and well, the fact that you have a heal on this squadron, so I can use that heal as a bit of a shield. Apparently this mains was completely not moving. I assumed he would try and accelerate once he saw he was getting torped, but he didn't move at all, so my first strike is going to miss. He's moving a little bit now, so I'm going to aim to account for that. Got a flood on my first strike, just hoping to get another hit. He pops a fighter, but it's way too late. 1, 2, 3, his engine's broken and he's flooding. Since I know his DCP is down and he's a fairly potent threat, I'm actually going to make a hit on him. I know he has his fighter up, so we're only going to get 1 strike out. So I'm going to pre-drop the Havars first. It's a 3x3 squadron with fairly tanky planes for tier 8, but more importantly, it launches 24 Havars per salvo at 2000 alpha per rocket. There's that broken engine mains. I can wait to hold my boost because of that short AA range as I mentioned. Now, as with all American rocket planes, once you lock in the course, you kind of want to hold it straight and steady. But there's a 14 rocket strike for about 8k alpha, and more importantly, I got a fire while his DCP is down, so he's gonna tick a little longer. In the meantime, they've secured a cap. With the Farragut, we have yet to secure a cap on our hand, on the other hand, so it's gonna be a bit of a problem. Enemy Lexington similarly in an advantageous situation. Would be nice to finish off the mains, though I do want to see his hit points before I make a dive on him. Using my hull to defend my allies a little bit and not moving, so he's probably going to get that torpedo strike off. Mains is fleeing with his 9,000 health. My Farragut's touching that cap that they've secured now though. So I'm going to go after this Bayern, and apparently there's a York here, but the York's AA is not heavy enough to turn me away. Enemy KGB that was pushing into decap, I assume, is dead. 5 bombs, no fire because the Bayern was already on fire, but 10,000 alpha, or 11,000 alpha technically, does mean that I'm going to secure a hefty hit. Enemy carrier does drop a fighter, so I do have to accelerate this drop a little bit, so that's why I'm using my engine cooling to try and get some of the bombs off. Do manage to skim him, and more importantly, I get a fire. The fighter does de-arm now, and I can finish him off with the torpedoes. Torpedoes on the Lexington 3x3 setup, 6400 alpha. Do note that the 6400 alpha is superior to the midway torpedo bombers 5000 alpha torpedo. You only drop 3 of them, and they're rather slow at 42 knots with torpedo acceleration and the module, but they are certainly a rather good torpedo. Pretty hefty HP pool of 18,000. Standard torpedo bomber consumables of heal, engine boost, and fighter. Turning circle is good, as with most American planes. Speed is slow. You can see even boosted I was only doing about 160, 170 knots. But overall the primary characteristics of the Helldiver make for a fairly solid and consistent torpedo bomber. He's dead. Hipper and mains. Let's see if we can clean up that mains. A little lower. I do have my heal ready, so I can potentially make 2 strikes. He's looking to probably turn out. Up my heal immediately because that first plane is kind of low. My hull's in a bit of trouble, so I'm going to turn it away before I come back to my planes. Perfect triple torpedo strike to clean up that mains that we crippled earlier. And we're already sitting at a healthy 113. But that doesn't mean the game's over. I'm being pushed by a Bayern and a York on my hull side, so after I dump probably what will be 1 torpedo into the water toward this Hipper, I am going to have to defend myself. Giving quite a bit of broadside, Lexington has quite a high citadel, so I'm quite vulnerable here. Score that single torpedo hit onto the Hipper, so that's nice. Some bonus damage. But at this point I'm going to defend myself, hoping the York will get finished off by the enemy battleship, or at least preoccupied by the Nuremberg. And that way I can focus my efforts on the Bayern. You can see top tier, the Lexington is an absolute monster. 2 bombs strike onto the Bayern on an imperfect strike, but instead of fire. Dropping quite high, but I hit him with 5 bombs and set another fire. Launching rockets at this point to either finish off the Bayern, who is burning in several sections. You can see the damage ticking up. And if he doesn't burn out, I'll go after him. But if he does burn out, then the rockets will clean up the York, and I'm going to pick up my 4th kill of the game in short order. Very straightforward. You can see I've basically ignored the Fubuki the whole match. Absolutely unconcerned with him. Break some modules. Potential damage this match is kind of low, which is pity because that's what I'm trying to farm. Crash Bay, if you take this kill, I'm going to be very annoyed. Oh, I'm very annoyed. No 4th kill for me, I guess. But whatever, I guess he was stalling out the inevitable death, or inevitable threat to my hull. So I'm not going to complain too much. Besides, most of the Crash Bay players probably are new to the Crash Bay anyhow. And we're having an alright game. Just means we're unlikely to crack it, unfortunately. But as I was saying, you can see I was ignoring the Fubuki mostly and just killing surface ships. You don't have to feel the need to mong after destroyers unless you absolutely have to. If they're not threatening a cap, for example, or if they've already taken a cap and they're just pressuring your ships, it's not a huge deal if you leave them be for a little bit, because there's so many threats to the destroyer that in a single destroyer game like this one, they're bottom tier, and they're not applying too much pressure to you or to the match. It doesn't take... it's not really worth the time to fly across the map considering my position to go after him. Confederate, after a 3-bomb strike on the Leander that sets him on fire. You can see the slim profile of these lower tier ships does cause a bit of a problem in that it's more difficult to strike them with all 6 of the bombs delivered by the Helldiver. As I mentioned, it's a 53mm bomb with 9200 alpha. Another 3-bomb strike and a fire, and I should be able to clean him up. Kind of hoping he kills the crash base, so 1, I can take a solo capture point, and 2, I can get my 4th kill and fight for a Kraken with the Lexington kill. But considering the 11-inch guns of the Crash Bay overmatched Leander's bow, I don't have too much hope. Especially because this Farragut's now joined in, and I'm still about 10 seconds off making my attack as of beginning to speak. Can he dodge enough? No, he cannot. Oh, we're still going to pre-drop once anyway. There's a full health almost carrier. My position being so conservative because I don't have concealment expert on this captain yet. Costing me there in terms of my ability. In terms of my ability to quickly influence the match. My damage total quickly climbing there with a quick fire. And we've softened up the AA defenses of the Lexington. Now normally I would pre-drop here, but it really depends on the fighter. If we absorb the fighter, then there's going to be no need to pre-drop because it won't have respawned yet. Although you can see the low airspeed of the torpedo bomber, the SB2C Helldiver, keeping us from having good sortie time. Oh, he does have a fighter, so I'm going to actually pre-drop once before I plunge in. Turning with the good turn circle, and now we're just plunging in at full speed, 14,000 health. If we hit all 3, we should be able to deliver a crippling strike. Oh well, he's so low now that he's mine, so I definitely had many opportunities to Kraken if I hadn't had kills stolen from me. The enemy, Lexington himself, having a decent game at 150,000 points of damage, but not quite able to impact the game as much as I was able to in my case. Quick cleanup, Confed, High Cal, 183, 12 torpedo hits, 25 bomb hits, 3 planes shot down, 6 incapacitations, 4 kills only, sad days, sad nights. 10 fires, 6 floods, 3 defender ribbons, 63 rocket hits, and 8 spotting ribbons. Team score wise, only 2200. This is of course because I'm a top tier carrier, but more than enough to carry my teammates across the finish line. You can see the enemy Fubuki did get to have a game because I ignored him. And the Crash Bay and Farragut, which irritatingly took kills from me, are down here at the bottom, but all that aside, kills don't really matter. It just would have been nice to Kraken out. You can see pretty even distribution, but a pretty high percentage of rocket damage, which is usually indicative of being top tier in the Lexington, with the Lexington Havars. But a good mix. All 3 of the Lexington's armaments are excellent. Torpedo bombers are very flexible, kind of slow torpedoes with a rather wide triple spread, but triple spreads are good in general. The bombs, of course, are excellent, especially for the tier. 53mm of penetration and 9200 alpha is great. And the rockets, with their 33mm of penetration on a rather flexible hull, make for an excellent package. Here on patch 0.9.6, so you'll note that the modules are a little bit different. Do note that I prefer the Havars on the Lexington over the Tiny Tims. This is mainly because the Tiny Tims have a different ellipse. As of right now, there are some current changes in the wind on the patch notes, but those have yet to be implemented. So for now, I prefer the Havars over the Tiny Tims, just because the Tiny Tims only are carried in a 3x2 setup. or rather it's a 3x3 setup, but each Corsair only carries 2 rockets. So you only launch 6, which I feel is not high enough density to make it worth it. The other 2 modules, of course, are just straight upgrades. And on this account in particular, I'm running Air Groups Modification 1, Aircraft Engines Modification 1, Aerial Torpedoes Mod 1. Now I used to run Torpedo Bombers Modification 1, but I've been testing out running aerial torpedoes in the modern metagame. The games are the pace of the game is kind of increasing in terms of higher speeds and higher shell velocities. So with ships like the Venezia or just fast-moving cruisers and destroyers in general, having the extra 2 knots of speed on American torpedoes is starting to be better than having the extra 5 seconds to line up attacks outside of long-range AA of like a Worcester or a Montana or something. So I've kind of made the switch at this point over the aerial torpedoes mod. This also means that if you miss a drop or if you need to abort a drop, you have to wait 5 less seconds, so it has some uses there as well. And then bombers modification, because the torpedo bombers have access to a heal. All 3 squadrons are great, but rocket aircraft you typically don't upgrade their HP because it's the lowest anyway. Torpedo bombers have access to a heal, so even though getting extra HP would be nice, it's not that necessary, and so the HP thus goes to the bombers. And last but not least, flight control mod for the extra deck space and servicing time. As I mentioned, this is not my main account, so we are not using a 19-point captain, but just a very standard American captain. You can see the base 9 points, followed up by demolition expert, followed up by, actually no, probably base 9 points followed up by plane speed, then a demolition expert. So take 9, take 11, take, my brain is chimping out, take 14, demolition expert, 15 last gasp, and last but not least will be concealment expert to bring my hull concealment down, because both the Lexington and Midway have enormous surface detection. You can see right now, if I go to my concealment parameters, it's 14.5, which is quite uncomfortable considering the Lexington is a huge ship, has no armor, and has a rather large citadel. If I strip away all the armor, you can see the citadel space is significant. So this account is not particularly old, about a week, maybe 8 days now. So I've already progressed to Lexington. You can see I have a sizable amount of experience on the hull already, 182, so about halfway there to the Midway, a little over. But anyhow, yeah, on the present patch, especially when you're top tier, the Lexington remains an absolute monster. With that said, that'll be all for now. Just a quick game, nothing particularly special. Just showing off that the Lexington, with her HEDVs, HE rockets, and torpedoes, is still by far the most flexible of the tech tree tier 8s. She kind of tied with the Shoukaku for tech tree dominance in my opinion. I of course have not yet touched the Percival, the new German tier 8, so maybe my opinions will shift once I get my hands on that, but for now I'm just going to be saying right now the Lexington is still great. As you saw, a top tier game, but even when you're bottom tier, her flexible package of torpedoes, high penetration bombs, and good rockets still allow her to excel. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will catch you all later. Cheers.